No, this is my first.
Oh, I'm so excited. All right, here we go. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for another In Conversation. I am up north in Oakland today. I have an event to go to this weekend, but I'm super excited to be chatting with Dara Baldwin, who is the author of an incredible book. And the title, I do not want to mess up, so I'm going to have her tell you the author, the title in a second. But the reason I'm so excited to talk about her and talk with her is because she is an author and a disability rights activist. And given everything that has happened this week, I wanted to not only center someone who is within the disability rights movement, but a Black person that is within the disability rights movement, because this is such a nuanced conversation and so layered with everything that happened with the BAFTAs this week. But there's so much more to it than we probably don't even understand. So, Ms. Dara Baldwin, thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thank you. Peace and blessings, everyone.
Yes, now tell everyone the title of your book before we start getting into this
Sure,
conversation.
and of course, I have a copy. To be a
Yes.
problem, to be a problem. Black women's survival in the racist disability rights movement.
Okay.
And it's from Beacon Press, which is a social justice press, so you know. And
Yeah.
it's out in stores now, so please go and get it, and go to our independent Black bookstores to get it.
Yes, absolutely. We love supporting those independent bookstores. Okay, Miss Baldwin, do I have questions for you? So,
Okay.
first and foremost, before we get into the nitty gritty, how did you get involved in disability rights advocacy?
Ooh, but I would say you talk about faith in this, and I'm a very person of faith. It was
Mm-hmm.
God's movement, because when I
Mm.
got in there, I was like, why am I here? And a lot of things that I talk about this in the book. So you know, the book is a memoir, which is a piece of your life.
Yeah.
And I discuss. I grew up in North. I was born in Spain.
Oh,
My father was in the Air Force, and my mom worked over in Spain, and then they brought me to United States in Newark, New Jersey, which is Brick City. I have an accent. People was like, "What are you talking about, Newark?" But you know, you can't live in Newark and not be in politics and stuff. You Ross Baraka, I mean, Emir Baraka was his father. The Hope House, my mother was part of that. Black Panthers, all of that stuff. But took a life in corporate world first and hated it, and then got into social justice work, policy work in particular. Got my master's at Rutgers University in Newark. Go Rutgers, go RU, and uh, by networking, got into the disability rights community. I was in DC for about 2 years, and someone said, "You need to go over there. They need you. They need some color," is what I was told. Um, and started in 2009. My first bill that I live in DC, DC statehood, and DC statehood, DC statehood, and free DC. Now we gotta say free DC because we're in occupation.
right.
But of course, policy work, and I'm blessed
Yeah.
to have worked in that. And my first bill that I ever worked on that got passed by Congress and signed by a president in the disability rights community was the hate crimes bill.
Mm.
And it was a time like we're talking about now. It was the hate crimes bill was really forwarded from religion, faith breakthroughs, right? Like anti-Semitism, right?
Sure, sure.
Islamophobia, right? That was that
Yeah.
crew,
Yeah.
and domestic violence, right? And that crew. And it we got pushback. They did not want disability language in the bill. They thought it would hold it up. Remember, this is 2009, right? We're not
Yeah.
right. Okay, right.
Right.
1990s when the ADA passed, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Civil Rights
Right.
Bill. And we fought and fought and said, no, you have to include disabilities. It was included. It is in the hate crimes bill. And if you look at the data now, what are the highest um, reported cases of hate crimes and hate crimes that are going to courts? Those against disabled folks.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
so
Well, thank you, first of all, for your work, because I, as someone who considers themselves an educating activist, and I say educating activist because I'm not like the person that goes out with the picket sign in a protest. That's not the type of activism that I do. But I think education, everybody finds their lane, right? And I think education is a huge part for me. But I will say, even from my own blind spots and being involved in this world, disability advocacy is not something that a lot of people talk about or include in their activism. And so that's why I was really excited to chat with you. But also, again, I know there's so many layers to disability advocacy and just advocacy in general, because even being, if you are a person with a disability, if you're a woman, that's another layer. And then if you're a person of color, that's also another layer. And so I want to go back to this week talking about what happened at the BAFTAs. You know, every Black person I know had a very visceral reaction to what happened, and naturally so. That the hearing the N word said in that manner is. I just think about my parents. My parents grew up in the South, Mississippi, Louisiana. My dad
Mm,
was born in 1944. My mom was born in 1952. That word has a lot of pain and trauma for them. And being also in the entertainment industry, I can only imagine fellow actors and filmmakers and creators being there to celebrate and then be stopped in their tracks to hear that. Then the other layer of it is that this is a man that has Tourette's, and we know that Tourette's is involuntary tics. Now, I just want to get, what was your initial reaction when you read and heard about that situation at the BAFTAs?
nothing new to us, nothing new to me in the
Mm,
disability rights community. As I said, so I started in 2009 professionally, but my grandmother had a disability, so I sat on her floor in the 80s to when we used to fold letters and put them in an envelope and mail them to Congress.
what is
Um,
that? What is that?
I know, right? Those of you who don't know, but to get a bill passed. Right, been in this community for years, and it was not new to many of us, many of the
Mm,
Black and brown and indigenous folks who do this work. It's unfortunate to say that. I have been called the N word multiple times in a disability, like and I talk about it in the book, so you can go read
yeah,
it. It is a common word that many of them think that they can use. Um, Not saying that Mr. Robinson was wrong in his disability. That's not the center of my conversation around it. I'm gonna
yeah,
say I'll say this: the first conversation for me and for many of us activists, and I ask you all to look at Black disabled folks who are talking about this, is the fact that the BAFTA Awards production team chose to show that to the world.
that.
Right,
Yes,
that's where we really need to
yes,
start from.
yes,
Um,
absolutely.
her name is Hillary Rosen, for those of you who don't know, Rosen, N as in Nancy, and she is the chair of the editorial staff that was in control of BAFTAs. BAFTAs is not a live show, it is a tape to live, and she chose to cut out spaces that she thought were offensive. She is a person and she claims to be against anti-Semitism and racism. I use air quotes and claim for those of you who can't see me. And she chose to leave out a conversation about Palestine. She chose to leave out someone who was homophobic, but she chose to keep that the offensive word in the tape to
Yeah,
live that went out to the world. So let's start there.
yeah, yeah,
Right, that and as you said, it not only was offensive to the 2 wonderful actors, Delroy and, Michael B., but it was offensive to the millions of people who were watching it either live stream or on their television.
sure.
And BAFTA and both the BBC have had a long history of racism. But so
Yeah,
has the disability rights community. And
yeah, yeah,
they use it as an excuse. Again, I write about this in my book. Chapter 3 really covers the racism if you want to read my book. And their claim to this, and you have heard it, how you and I connected. You were being called ableist and all of these things from activists. And I said to you, they're mostly white disabled people who are calling you that because they don't understand that ableism encompasses racism, and so they
mm,
don't get that, and, they will tell you in a minute, "Because I am disabled, because of my disability, I cannot be racist." Now that's the second part of this conversation, which came up with Mr. Robinson, right?
now dive a little bit into that, that ableism encompasses racism. Explain that a little bit more, because that caught my ear.
Sure. So ableism, the definition is the simple definition of it, right, is the leaving out and not discussing disabilities or even making people with disabilities as a um stain on on our country, on our culture and on what we are. And that is horrible to have a disability. And to
Right.
when you discuss things, when you write papers, when you write policy, that you leave out disabled people and that you don't encompass their issues and their concerns. And in ableism, that means all of the isms. The reason I'll say this to you and I'll let you know, I do disability justice now, not disability rights anymore. I left that community.
Mm.
No rights movement in the world is encompassing justice. Rights movements are centered
Yeah.
in
Wow.
white supremacy. And so
Yeah.
a group of people
Yeah.
created disability justice. I say that to say the first principle, right? There are tenets, 10 principles, just like with the Black Panthers, reproductive justice, you have 8 principles. Well, the first one is intersectionality.
Yeah.
And that's where that ableism comes in. That ableism encompasses you being homophobic, xenophobic, racist in anything that you do against disabled people. And I'm being very simple in my explain because we're on a half-hour conversation,
Yeah.
but that's what that means. And the
Yeah.
reason it came up and the reason disability justice was created was because the disability rights community had been asked, had been educated, had been talked to for over 30 years. And a bunch of young, mostly young, Black and brown, indigenous, queer, disabled people said, we are never going to change the rights people. So we got to create our own. And that has
Mm.
happened in every rights movement, right? I just said it,
Sure.
reproductive justice movement.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have housing justice now. Housing justice is Black and brown folks who said we can't do housing rights. Transportation justice, I do that. Transportation equity has said the rights model doesn't work for us. Well,
Yeah.
same with
Wow.
disability justice.
I
So
love
that's
hearing
what
the
that means.
difference. Yeah, it's interesting because coming from faith-based communities, that we talk about deconstruction, right? But there's a difference between deconstruction and decolonization, which a lot of people in the deconstruction movement haven't decolonized their mindset, right? And those are two very different things that I think people need to. And when you break it down with all of these different movements, that's really the crux of why a lot of these movements don't have any movement is because they haven't decolonized. That's where it comes from. So, like, I, even with you were naming all the different movements, LGBTQ rights also is still very white
Right.
centered. There are, in the feminist movement, still very white women centered, right? Very white women centered, right? We could talk about that for probably an hour. Uh, but I think that that's the difference is that even when you're getting into wanting to have quote unquote equal rights, it always ends up centering the same type of people as the people that you're saying that you're opposing, right? So it really is more of a decolonization mindset than it is just like an advocacy right. So I love that you broke down the difference between the rights and the justice because that is what the deciding factor is. And I think that a lot of progressive movements do have the right heart, right? I think at the end of the day, they do want to achieve. You're like, I'm gonna fight you on that. But I do think at the end of the day, they do want to achieve something positive, but they haven't actually done the work of the decolonization in order to make the movement have progress. And you can see that, right? Like there's enough data to show that what's hindering so many of these movements and progress is that mindset. So it's interesting to hear that it's transferred over to the disability movement.
Very much so. Yes. And I push back, and not push back, but I smile because I don't
I
believe
try to
that.
see the best in people, girl.
I do too. I understand that.
Try
I
to see the
understand that.
best in people.
I do. I understand that. But as I tell these people in this work, again, my book, A Black Woman, Right to Be a Problem, came from W.E. Du Bois, Souls of Black
Hmm.
Folks. And when he went
Mm,
down in the South and had, right, where you just talking about your mother and your father, my great grandparents are from North Carolina, South Carolina, Mississippi,
yeah.
and told those white folks about racism and what it was. And they said to him, how does it feel to be a problem? And he wrote essays about
Mm,
that. And that became his book, Souls of Black Folks. If you read
yeah.
W, right?
Yeah.
When I was doing this work, and I talk about this in the book, we work in coalitions too, right? Everyone does. There's a huge coalition called CCD in Washington, D.C. And 100, over 100 organizations. I was the only person of color,
Mm,
not Black, right? Of color doing the policy work. And every time I was in a room, they said, why do you have to be such a problem? And I am a journal, and so I have written down and said this and reading W.E. Du Bois. I try to read him every year. I have read, I said, and when I got
yeah.
asked to write this book, I said, that's going to be the title. The other
Yeah.
side of it is that a Black woman in a racist disability rights movement. And I bring that up because what you said about progressivism and liberals and progressive movement. No, they do not want the right thing. And what I'm saying to you, like, I know I'm online. I don't care. I've said this every panel
Say
on
it.
Clubhouse.
No, say it. We're
And
here
this
to
is
be
what,
honest.
and
Yeah.
right, exactly. And I want to see the best in people, and they need to get better. But you right, feminist white folks, like abortion. That's why we have reproductive justice and abortion rights, right? They told 2013, we told white people, white women in the abortion movement, you need to codify Roe versus Wade. And they told
Yeah.
us, right, that was Black and Pink, Dominique, love you, girl, love Dominique, love Black and Pink, who led the,
Yes. Yeah.
and Sister Song, who led that movement to say, you need to codify, because what a judiciary case from the Supreme Court says, it goes back to Congress, you create a law. But those white women said, we don't have nothing to worry about, everything gonna be fine. And that's
Yeah.
not true. And the
Right.
progressive movement and the liberal movement, as we just said, I just told you, have no tenet.
Huh.
They have no North Star. What their North Star is they want to move the chess pieces on the chessboards. They want to move them, but they don't ever want to not be in charge. Not It
Yes.
still has to center them. That is progressive.
Yeah.
That is why we have a problem in the Democratic Party right now.
Yes.
Well, y'all
Yeah.
do, because I'm not a Democrat. Never wanted to be one. And they will not understand. They will never understand that we need to wipe those chess pieces off, turn the chessboard over, and start a new world order. Needs to
Don't even
be
turn it over.
happening.
Get a whole new board.
That's it.
Yeah.
Whole new board.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when people say the progressive liberal, it is not true. That's the disability rights movement. They want, just like this
Mm,
conversation about BAFTA. They wanna center on his disability as the most important thing, but not the racist conversation, not the racist harm that happened. And so that's the third part
right.
that we talked about in this,
Yeah.
right? Is
Yeah.
the racism. And again, I discuss this in my book. If you read my book, please read the introduction. I have a glossary there. And shout out to my soror and my sister Charlene Carruthers, Unapologetic is her book. She had a glossary, and that's where I got it from, right? Nothing's new. And I write out these definitions about what a new world order means, right? What it means to be in a justice movement, what it means to not have a North Star, which is what progressivism does not have. And again, it was proven in these last 3 elections where white women at a higher rate, over 50 some 55, 56,
Yeah.
57, 60
Too
percent
high
of
for
them,
what we knew what was
that's
gonna happen. Absolutely.
voted for that person that's in the White House, and right, refuse to vote for a Black woman. They refuse to vote for the white woman, for their own girl. So this
Right. Right.
shows you, right, like there is a problem in the progressive liberal movement, right,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
needs to be addressed, and it showed its ugly self in what happened in BAFTA, that
Yeah. Yeah.
many people came forward and said, "Oh, he has a disability," and not yes, he does. It is also not proven, because of what I heard, and I've been talking to a lot of people. He said it multiple times that night. He said it on the red
Yes.
carpet to Black
Yeah.
actors. He said it
Yeah.
in the show. He directed it towards Black actors and actresses. And
Mhm.
no one, as they say, checked him, got him
Yeah.
together and said, "You have to stop this." Yes, there is a possibility in your disability that you're just saying the word, but when you direct it multiple times in the same evening to only those people who look like that, then you question that, right? That's
Yeah. Yeah.
that part. But it's also racist. And for Alan Cummings to come out, and that's why I say the BAFTA production team was wrong in showing it in a tape to live
Yeah.
show, but then
Sure.
also wrong in not giving Alan Cummings, but Alan Cummings was wrong too in not doing and knowing to apologize and address the N word and how harmful it was to Del Rey and to Michael B
Yeah.
and to the millions of people watching. And
Yeah.
that's just
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah. That's I think that was the bigger issue for me. I can in not fully understanding, even though I've done a lot of research recently and have had conversations and have a little bit more understanding about how Tourette's works. I understand involuntary tics and I have respect for that. But it's if you can't control what you say, but you can control how you apologize, right? And I think that that was the bigger issue for me. It's a simple, we know we gave a preliminary kind of warning to everybody at the beginning, but we still want to address that we know how harmful that word is. We're sorry for the hurt that it caused. But it was the if you were offended, we're
There
sorry.
you
That
go.
felt like the centuries long gaslighting that Black people have been subjected to when it comes to racial harm. And I said this in a reel, but a friend of mine said that Black people have to have infinite patience and permanent get over it. And that's exactly how I felt in this moment, because it's like, look, we're asking for a legitimate apology. We know he has a disability. That doesn't mean that excuses or takes away the harm from that word. That word has literal centuries of harm and violence towards our community. And so, yeah, the fact that it wasn't edited out, the fact that the apology on air was subpar, the fact that the apology off air was subpar, it just goes to show that Black people's pain is never taken seriously. It's never acknowledged in a way that it should be. And I can only imagine someone who's Black and also in the disability community, in the disabled community, just feeling like no care is received for them. So that's why I was so interested to talk to you about the work that you do, because for you, it is kind of twofold. You're not only advocating for people with disabilities, but you're also trying to center those people within that community that have another layer of harm that they also have to navigate in such a volatile world.
Yeah, no, you're completely right on that, sis, and, that goes to that not having a North Star with progressivism and liberalism. Exactly
Yeah,
what you said. You can make
yeah,
an apology for his disability, but you didn't wanna make an apology for the racism, and that is what we're talking about.
yeah,
And
yeah.
again, in my book, To Be a Problem, I'm gonna tell you, I discuss it is a culture in the disability
Mm,
rights movement, both in the United States and the UK specifically. There are other places around the world that it is a culture for them to disrespect Black people specifically. And I'll talk about two of them, but there's about six of them that I discuss in the book. They
okay.
do this they do this kinda, thing where, and I've worked in social justice for over 40 years of my life, and all you hear the movements, right? And I've never heard of this till the disability rights meeting. They do this comparison, and what I mean is, in the disability rights movement and everything we do, the number one issue for us is getting people out of institutions.
Mm,
Disabled people are institutionalized at a higher rate, and I'm an
sure.
abolitionist, right? And in abolitionism is mostly like what Angela Davis, I love them, and they're taking this on, is more than closing prison. You need to close these mental health institutions. You need to close these troubled teen spaces. You need to close these places. Any place that keeps a Black body in bondage. That's our
Mm,
movement. Okay. So I say that to say, even in the disability rights white community, they call themselves the Underground Railroad, the Disability Underground Railroad, the Harriet Tubmans of disability. Yes, you're hearing me
hmm.
correctly. And the first, the
You saw me
first
shift in my seat, like, okay, let me hear this.
listen, listen. You should have seen my editor when she was reading the book, and that's why I wanted a publisher, because you have to get vetted, right? And
Yeah.
I had to have receipts, right? The lawyers was like, "Nah, you can't just say this." I'm like, "Oh no, here you go. Here go the article that they wrote about
Yes.
this. Here go the
Oh,
flyers
wow.
that they send
Wow.
out about this," and they call right. And the first time I saw it, I went to my white male boss and said, "You can't. What is this? What is happening here?" I was like, "Black
Mhm.
women will kill you over Harriet Tubman." Let me be clear about that one. And two is, and no, yes, nursing homes are horrible, right? If you're from New
Mm,
York, New Jersey, that area, over 500,000 people were killed in nursing homes. Cuomo lied, right? All across the country during COVID, so many people died in confined spaces, specifically nursing homes, specifically group homes, specifically mental health places and prisons.
mm,
Right? Okay, we know that, but they were not enslaved. They are not enslaved
mm,
people. That is a history and a tradition you cannot mess with, and they do it all the time. Even today, I just got a flyer earlier in the year to talk about there's a bill to get people out of institutions, and it's we're the Harriet Tubman under, and they still use it, right? So discussing the racism they don't care about. Another comparison I'll tell you they did, same thing. And receipts is, I got this in email. Even the lawyer said, they put this in writing. I said, yes, they don't care.
Wow. Wow.
The other one they do that's really harmful and shows you they don't understand is our Bloody Sunday in the civil rights movement, right, is in Alabama, right,
Yeah.
in the march, okay. And they have what's called the crawl. And the crawl for disabilities before the ADA was passed, they crawled up the stairs of the Capitol to show the world that the Capitol is not accessible. Wonderful, beautiful activism. But they were not beat up by Capitol Police. In fact, they had a permit to do it. Nobody died. Nobody's life was in danger, right? Like with God rest his soul, John Lewis almost lost his life.
Mm-mm.
We just lost, the last woman, black woman who was on that bridge
Yeah.
just passed out, right? Okay, they lost. They were bloody, right? The governor of Alabama martialized every white male of the age 18 and over, was a law enforcement, and said stop them by any means necessary, right? They call it their Bloody Sunday. Like, this is the crawl is just as important and just as much as the Bloody Sunday of Alabama.
Mm.
And I'm like, no, you can't do that. That's racist. And they will tell you that's not racism.
Hmm.
We are in the same fight. And I'm like, no, you're not. And they don't understand this. And that culture, that belief that because you have a disability, you have no privilege, is what happened at BAFTA, is what this man John that's why John Robinson's
Yeah.
apology looked the way it looked. And so they don't understand that. They don't understand that, and I don't just do race, right? You can have
Yeah.
a transgender woman who is a immigrant, who is formerly incarcerated, and who is a disabled black person. And so what we do, chapter 5 of my book is recommendations, right? Because I don't want to just give you the problems. We
Right.
must
Of
cen-
course.
we must center Black, brown, indigenous, disabled people in our work of justice. Remove their barriers. You will remove everybody.
Yeah. None of us are liberated until we all are, right?
So all are
Um,
liberated.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. So going back to the idea of Black and Brown people being institutionalized you're an abolitionist. What is and this could be in your book as well, but what is your solution for people who do need care?
Yeah. So
Because I understand the feeling of abolishing those systems. I'm totally for that. But I don't know what the solution would be in terms of people that may need care in terms of like mental health or disability that maybe can't live on their own. And I know institutionalizing them shouldn't be like the immediate go-to, but I'm just curious from your perspective, being a part of this movement, what would be the alternative?
Sure, I do discuss it in the book, chapter 3. We talk about where it came from. Let's start, right? You got to know history to order it right to
Sure.
change. So in the
Hmm.
late 1800s, this country created what's called the Ugly Laws. And you can look it up. It is still in existence. And what the Ugly Laws said was you could not have a disability and be in public spaces. Let that sit. Okay.
Oof.
So that, and it started in San Francisco, great old liberals, but it meant that if you had a disability, you couldn't go to school, you couldn't go to the park, you couldn't go grocery, right? You couldn't go to faith, wherever, church, synagogue, or mosque. You had to stay home.
Wow.
And then in 1930s, FDR, the racist FDR and ableist FDR, created the racist and ableist New Deal. And what the New Deal did, as we say, codify stuff, he said, you know what? Instead of keeping those disabled people at home, let's put them in institutions. And they
Mm.
started just institutionalizing disabled people. Then again, another 50 something years later, in 1970s, is when we found out about, if you found out about it before, but it became a really good case and got people out, was the Willowbrook case, again in New York. If you know, it was the first, what do you call it, whistleblower case, where it was a doctor in that space who was like, I
Wow.
can't, right? What they're doing.
Mm.
These people were naked. They had no clothes. They would throw food on the floor to them, right? Geraldo Rivera, for those of you old enough to know who he is, I mean, we all know him as a right wing
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
That was his first investigative report, was Willowbrook
Oh,
and what happened
wow.
there in New York,
Okay.
right? So they started shutting them down. They said, no, you can't treat disabled people like this. Now
Right.
remember,
Right.
disabled people did not and did not get a civil or human right until July 26th of 1990, not 18, right? So they couldn't vote, right? They had no they could right? They couldn't go to school till in 1976.
Really?
Right. Yeah, that's what the ADA says, right? When before that's why when
Yeah, yeah.
white feminists
Wow.
say, "Oh, white women got the right to vote in 1913." No, they did
No,
not.
you
White
got the right to vote.
not only that, not only that, but white able-bodied women got the right to vote, right? Even
Yeah,
white
wow.
disabled, they could not vote until 1990. That's when they could cast a vote. That's only 36 years ago, right? That ain't too long ago. They
Yeah,
couldn't they
wow.
could barely go to school, right? Schools were not accessible, right? I talk about this in my book. They did not have a civil or human right. So they weren't considered human. So they're in the institution. Now, when you ask about abolitionism in this space, I will tell your audience, please read Miriam Kaba, and I'll send you so you'll know. She's
Yeah, Imma
excellent.
put it in the notes as well.
And Andrea Ritchie, who write about this. What people don't understand about abolitionism is that abolitionists dream. They say, "What could the world look like?" That's what Frederick Douglass, that's what Harriet, right? They said, "What would the world look like without enslaved people?" And that's right. So, what would the world look like without institutionalizing people? And if you follow
Mhm.
the abolitionist movement, if you provide the services that people need to live, you wouldn't need those things. And we have much
Yes.
data that shows it is it costs the community not only within the funding, the federal dollars, the state dollars, but also in community and including disabled people.
Sure.
Look
Yeah.
at the Olympics. Alana Myers with her beautiful sons and her signing to them saying, "I want." They were there. They were part of what was happening. That disabled people need to be in the community, and it is
Yes, yeah.
cheaper to have them in the community. So when
I
you
love that.
ask, there you go. If you had community care, if you had people who care for them at home, which you can, in
Yeah,
many
yeah.
cultures, especially ours, black and brown people take care of their elderly. They take
Yes.
care of grandma. Grandma lives in the house. We do not care if we got
Mhm.
3 generations in the house. The whole
Right.
pull up your bootstrap and you being single and by yourself and live and I did it all on my own. I bought my own house is a white supremacist thought. That is not
Mm.
how black and brown people. We are community, right? My grandfather owned a 3-family house that
Hmm.
had, right, 8 different families lived in it, 8 different times in their life. That was the family house. That was the family
Yeah.
place you went to on Sunday. We are about taking care of multiple generations in our home. And if
Yeah,
we
yeah.
take that model and put it in a community, you would not have
Mm.
to have these places. Even people with mental health diagnosis, people say people with mental health diagnoses are violent. That is not true. 99.9% of psychologists will tell you the only time they are violent is like when many of us are, is if you're violent towards them or
Mm.
if they're not getting their services, right? They're not
Yeah.
getting the things they
Yeah.
need. They're not just like me and you, not getting food, not getting clothing, not getting a house, a roof over their head, not getting the conversation they need. Everybody need to talk to somebody at some time in their life.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
COVID didn't show you that, oh well. So that's what that means, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That we would need these institutions because in those institutions they abuse our people. They
Yeah.
kill our people at higher rates, and our people are living in spaces where they're not happy. They're not enjoying
Mm.
life. They're not being a part of the community. Again,
Yeah.
I will bring up Alana and her beautiful boys at the Olympics, her beautiful deaf sons, and she and I are IG friends, and I was so happy
Oh.
to see it. Her husband signing and telling his little boy, "Mommy is the champion." I mean, how right? They are supposed to be a part of this world. And
Yeah.
that's what that means when we say abolition, get these people out of institutions and into the
Yeah.
community. And there are plenty of Black disabled people
Yeah.
to learn about, to learn their wonderful things. Carrie is a wonderful Carrie Gray, if you wanna find Keri Gray, Gray, on Instagram. She's wonderful. She does a lot of work. Anita Cameron, right? She does a lot of work. Allison, does a lot of work down in Memphis, Tennessee. Anita's in Rochester, New York. They're all of Keith Jackson, who's from Massachusetts. These are wonderful Black and brown folks to follow. Vilisa Thompson, she created the hashtag disability2 TOO white. So we need to learn, but that's what abolitionism, that's what it is for us, is that
Yeah.
that if we had the services they needed, they could be home. They could be with us.
Yeah.
If we need to understand the white model of being on your own and being independent is not something that works. First of all, they're not. I look at white boys when they tell me they bought their house, and I'm like, no, you didn't. Your daddy paid for you to go to college. Your daddy paid for you to go to law school. You did not. When you did it on your own means, you went to work, you cashed a check, you put it in the bank, and you
Yeah.
cut that check, and that check paid for all that stuff that you got. And that is not true. That is not how that happened, because daddy had a trust fund for you, or, like Elon Musk out here telling people he did it on his own. Man, please, you didn't do nothing on your own. And so, you didn't even buy that house on your own, right? They get together and somebody put the down payment on, right? They paid the 22,000 or half of the house, and then you making some payments. You didn't do it on your own. That doesn't exist. And in the Black and brown community, we don't live like that. We live in community. I think it's also why Black and brown people are really attracted to HBCUs, right? HBCU universities treat their students much different than you get
Collective
treated at.
care.
That's right, at a
Yeah.
PWI. And I know that I went to PMU my first 2 years, go Rattlers. But I had to go home. My grandmother got sick, and I was like, I got to be home. And I finished at Rutgers University. So I saw the difference.
Right.
I saw it, and it is true, right?
Yeah,
But anyway,
it is.
that's what that means about
No, I love that. It's definitely that it takes a
abolitionism.
village. It takes a village. And I
Yeah,
believe in that too. I think society needs to lean more into that collective care mindset, and we just don't do it. And
don't.
it's a shame because, as you said, there's enough statistics and studies to show that when you are in community, you do better. Plain and simple. I know we're out of time. I'm so grateful for you spending time with me. Can you let everyone know where they can follow you again, where they can pick up your book, whatever you
Yes.
have going on? I love what you're doing. I love that you're a part of this movement and advocating for justice. So plug all the things, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sis. Thank you so much. My book is To Be a Problem, A Black Woman's Survival in the Racist Disability Rights Movement. You can find it all bookstores, but please go to independent bookstores. If you're in Newark, New Jersey, I will be at the Newark Public Library on Saturday, April 18th. Through my sorority, I have been chosen as a Delta on Tours author. I'm excited for that, Eastern Region. And that's 1 to 4 p.m. And then I'm at NJDC 07 for everything, whatever you look. So New Jersey to DC in '07. I went in '07. I literally went, I made my decision 3 hours after Obama, if you all remember, in January 7th, he said, I'm gonna run for office. And I said, oh, I'm moving to DC. so, so I moved to
I
DC to be ready
love
for him. And it was a wonderful time to be in DC. But that's
it.
why I am. And
Yeah,
on Substack, my name Dara Baldwin, and I'm going to start writing some articles and getting things. People have told me I need to start getting more information out.
you
So I
do. You
will.
do.
And that's where I am. Please email me or talk to me. Let me know. A lot of people, like you said, and it goes the other way. Social justice has not included disabilities. It's really
Mm,
hard to say, right? Even Black organizations that I have had to sit down and talk to their leaders and talk to them about their ableist language. Love her dearly, even Jasmine Crockett, my soror, I love her, but she's like, when you say things like spineless and they don't have a backbone, I'm like, that's ableism, right? Like you
it is
can't,
language. Yeah.
right? It's language. Like when people say all hands on deck, and I'm like, okay, not everybody can use it. So we say everybody on deck, right? We say, right? We don't say they're not spineless, they're not back, they have no
Mm,
courage. They have no courage. Like let's you use a thesaurus, let's use the language. I tell people stay
I love those
away.
subtle shifts. Yeah, that's
Right.
helpful. Yeah.
Stay away from body parts, right? Stay like
Yeah.
right when people say, eyes on the prize. I'm like, not everybody can see and not everybody use their eyes. And so we say heart, your heart on the horizon, right? Like those are
Mm.
different ways to say
Or
things.
even
And
keep your
so
mind on the prize. Keep your
there
mind
you
on the prize works.
well,
Yeah.
because even mine, remember, we have people who have mental health disabilities. We have people who
Okay.
have, right?
Okay.
So
Okay.
I just,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But everybody got a heart, right? You cannot live
Sure.
without a
Sure.
heart. And even in the heart,
Sure.
it's some people have heart problems and things like so. There's
Mm.
always those nuances, but those that are really derogatory like that, like being like when you say someone's spineless and someone has no backbone, that really that's offensive to like people with cerebral palsy, people who with
Right.
paraplegic. That's really offensive. And if you're organizing and you want people to come out, you say all hands on deck, your disabled people ain't coming because they know, right?
Mm,
That's not us. They don't want us. And so I'm an organizer for Free DC, Go Free DC, and that's what we have a whole accessibility department and chapter and people working together to make sure we can make it as accessible as possible. But that's what I do. That's what we want to do. Everybody, we all got work to do, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so
Well, I
that's what we do.
appreciate all that you're doing, all that you're doing. Thank you so
That
much for chatting with me. I'll put all your information for everybody. And thanks everyone for tuning in. And we'll see you next time. All right. Bye.